Hey everyone, and welcome. Today we are diving into a really fascinating explainer that maps out our 2026 digital landscape. And I've got to tell you, the source data we're looking at reveals a pretty striking scientific reality. We like to think of micro-entertainment as just a bad habit, right? Well, it turns out it's actually actively and physically rewiring your brain chemistry. So we're going to explore exactly how perpetual scrolling becomes a literal physical dependency and what the data suggests we can actually do to take our minds back. Now let me ask you a question. Why does ordinary life suddenly feel intolerably slow? Seriously, have you noticed how just sitting in a quiet room or having a normal, real-time conversation suddenly feels, well, understimulating? Like you're almost crawling out of your skin? The science indicates this isn't just you being impatient. It's a measurable decline in cognitive health, and it's completely driven by a physical dependency on short-form loops. Your brain literally craves the next rapid-fire hit. It's no wonder everyday reality feels like it just can't keep up. Okay, let's dive into this. Section 1. The era of sensory overload and surviving the 2026 digital landscape.
So, in an environment where simultaneous video loops and hyper-fast content are just the default mode of existing, we experience something called neurological friction. This is basically the intense physiological sensation of the infinite scroll. It's this state of high arousal and really deep discomfort caused by your brain just absolutely screaming for more stimuli. You know that phantom itch to pick up a second screen while you're already watching a movie? Yeah, that is neurological friction. It's a state of hyperarousal where your brain feels genuinely starved if it doesn't have overlapping microentertainment.
Which brings us to Section 2, Rewiring Your Neural Architecture and the Physical Cost of the Loop. To really grasp this, we have to look at the brain like a physical structure, almost like a building. Clinical data confirms a measurable thinning of gray matter in the prefrontal cortex. Now that's the specific architecture in your head responsible for focus, planning, and complex decision-making, and chronic microstimulus exposure is actively eroding it. The source data confirms something pretty terrifying. The brain is sacrificing its long-term structural integrity for temporary dopamine hits. It is literally, physically shrinking its capacity to focus.
And this brilliantly illustrates exactly how that structural degradation happens. It's basically a battle between the fast-path amygdala response and the slow-path executive function. High-speed content completely hijacks the fast path, the amygdala, flooding your system with instant, totally effortless dopamine. But by constantly prioritizing this shortcut, you're entirely bypassing the slow path, which is where your executive function lives. And because that slow path isn't being utilized, well, it degrades over time. It structurally weakens your actual capacity for intentional thought.
The source points out exactly why this feels so overwhelming. Quote, the constant dopamine drip has recalibrated the human threshold for stimulation. Guys, this is the death of the boredom baseline. We have pushed our threshold for stimulation so incredibly high that anything less than rapid-fire micro-entertainment just completely fails to register. Engaging in deep focus now feels like a profound physical struggle against your own wiring, all because ordinary life simply cannot compete with that constant dopamine drip.
Moving right along to Section 3, the retention crisis and the illusion of competence. So because the physical architecture of our prefrontal cortex is compromised, our cognitive fragility is at an absolute all-time high. I want you to think about the number 3. Think about what a typical 3-hour evening looks like for a lot of us now. It's usually an unbroken stretch of rapidly consuming high-speed digital content. I mean, you might swipe through hundreds of distinct videos, jokes, and news bites in just one single sitting.
But here is the really jarring reality of those 3 hours. Concepts retained? 0. You can consume hours of high-speed content and genuinely struggle to recall a single coherent concept just minutes after putting your phone down. It's wild. The data basically flies right past your visual cortex, triggers the amygdala for a quick little thrill, and then vanishes entirely into thin air.
The source data refers to this whole phenomenon as the illusion of competence. See, rapid consumption cleverly mimics learning, so it makes you feel incredibly informed. But because that slow path executive function is totally bypassed, the data never actually enters your long-term memory. It's a complete mirage. On a macro level, this means our society is losing the capacity for deep work. We are creating an entire population that feels super informed but can't actually engage in the sustained thought required to solve complex problems.
But don't panic just yet. Here is Section 4, Reclaiming Cognitive Sovereignty and the Prescription for 2026.
The really good news here is that the human brain is neuroplastic. So just as it was wired by this crazy digital landscape, it can absolutely be purposefully rewired. To rebuild that gray matter and thicken the prefrontal cortex, the source lays out 3 actionable strategies. Step 1, monotasking. You've got to stop the split-screen lifestyle and focus on one single input. That re-engages the slow-path executive function. Step 2, intentional boredom. Basically, practice sitting still without any stimuli to manually reset your normal dopamine baseline. And step 3, digital friction. Build physical barriers between you and your feeds to stop that automatic, infinite scroll dead in its tracks.
So this brings us to a vision of the future where cognitive sovereignty is actually regained, but it starts with a fundamental choice. Will you choose depth, or will you fall back into the loop? Reclaiming your brain's architecture requires active, daily resistance against our current digital landscape. The science is incredibly clear. The stakes are literally your own mind, and the choice is entirely yours. Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer. I really hope it empowered you to take back your focus, and I'll catch you on the next one.